Recording in progress.
Good morning, Governing Board Member of Myanmar, Dr. My San Yi, Board of Directors of SEAMEO Kitab and Language, respected keynote speakers, presenters, and participants. Welcome to the second day of the 13th AISOFOLL. We are now heading to the plenary session 2. To start the session, I would like to introduce our moderator, Dr. Lulu Laila Amalia. She is the head of Language Laboratory and Micro-Teaching in Faculty of Language and Literature Education, Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, Indonesia. She is also an assistant professor in English Language Study Program. She has conducted research on reflective practice and narrative inquiry as her field of interest. Without further ado, may we welcome Dr. Lulu Laila Amalia. To Dr. Lulu Laila Amalia, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Ibu Anissa. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second keynote speakers session. Yeah, the second plenary session. And then we are actually going to have 4 keynote speakers for this session. I think without further ado, let's welcome the first speaker, yeah, because we are going to have outstanding presentation, yeah, from all of the keynote speakers. And then each speaker actually will have 20 minutes to deliver their paper. The questions and answers session will be held after all keynote speakers deliver their presentation. So please hold your questions. Should you have any questions, write the questions in the Google form that the committee will share later on in the chat box. Okay, the first speaker is Professor Robert Godwin Jones. Okay, Professor Jones, are you here with us? Hello, Professor Jones.
Yes,
I'm Professor Poner. Okay. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see. Yeah. Yes. So I think let me see whether the committee has informed you that you're going to deliver the presentation on the first part. Professor Jones?
Is Professor Poner first or am I first? He was listed first in the program.
Yeah.
I'm happy to, yeah, either.
Oh, okay.
I mean, yeah.
Sorry.
I was, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, Professor, Dr. Poner, you are already here, yeah? Okay, so is it okay if Professor Jones comes first and then after that you will do the presentation on the second part?
Sure, that's fine, of course.
Okay, I'm really sorry. Okay, because I
No
just
worries.
got the
That's
information,
perfect.
yeah, from the committee. Okay, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, before the first keynote speaker deliver his presentation, allow me to read his short bio. Professor Jones, my name is Lulu Laila Amalia, and then I will be chairing the session. Professor Jones, Robert Godwin Jones, PhD, is a professor of world languages and international studies at Virginia Commonwealth University and past director of the English language program there, as well as director of the Instructional Development Center Office of Information Technology. His research is principally in applied linguistics in the areas of language learning and technology and intercultural communication. Most recently, he has worked in the areas of mobile-assisted language learning, open educational resources, telecollaboration, and informal language learning. He writes a regular column for the journal Language Learning and Technology on emerging technologies. He has also published 5 books and numerous articles and book chapters, as well as regularly presenting at international conferences. His most recent book, co-edited with
Recording
Richard Lin
stopped.
and I.G. Wang in 2018, is
Recording
Internationalizing
stopped.
English Language Education in
Recording in
Globalized
progress.
Taiwan. Professor Jones, you will have 20 minutes, and he will talk about language learning today. Where is technology leading us? What does it mean for foreign language teachers? The screen is yours, Professor Jones.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to share my presentation, if I can. Okay, I think we can get started. I'm very happy to be here. I would have loved to have been in Indonesia, but this is how we're used to doing conferences these days. So I'm going to be talking about how I see the future of language learning and technology in my presentation today. I'm going to be basing my talk on two articles that I have published on the topic, and both of these are open access journals. So if you're interested after the talk and getting more details about what it was I was talking about, you can go to those journal articles if you're so inclined. I'm going to offer three scenarios for the future of language learning and technology. The first is that with the tools that we have today through artificial intelligence, that maybe in the future there'll be less need to learn a second language. Technology will take care of that for us. The second scenario is that if we do, in fact, need to learn another language, we don't need formal instruction. There are lots of online resources. It's been shown in a lot of studies recently that those can be used to learn a language independently, autonomously. And the third scenario, which I think for the benefit of all us language teachers, I hope will be the future, is that we do indeed still need formal instruction, but we also need to integrate technology into that. So the first scenario is we don't really need to learn a second language. There are pundits out there like this fellow who says that that we'll have things like multilingual versions of personal assistants like Siri, and that will do the translation for us. We don't really need to learn a second language. And in fact, there's been a lot of improvement in machine translation, and Google Translate, other machine translation services are available on a lot of mobile devices, and the quality of the translations are getting better all the time. There's a lot of competition in that market, so there are a lot of technical advances. And we're seeing, particularly in terms of artificial intelligence, two trends that I think are important. One is huge collections of data that are analyzed and then fed to the second thing that we're seeing, namely the creation of these AI systems built on analyzing that data and using multi-layered neural networks to be able to deal with language in a quite sophisticated way. And we'll talk about that. I'll show you some examples of that. And we're particularly seeing improvements in speech recognition and in speech synthesis through those developments in AI. And I just want to show you a couple of examples of things that are on the market right now. This is called the Ambassador, which is an over-the-ear piece that is capable of dealing in 20 different languages, costs 69 American dollars, fairly inexpensive. We also have lots of other devices, for example, smart glasses. Google has announced a forthcoming product that will incorporate multiple microphones, speakers as well as cameras. And these products, these consumer products, have things like Google Translate built into them. What we're seeing there are projections of a kind of science fiction world that's familiar to you, and I won't play this clip, I'll just talk about it briefly. It's familiar to you if you're familiar with the series Star Trek. There's something in Star Trek called the Universal Translator, and it's a handheld device that automatically translates language, whether they're earthbound or alien, and it works transparently. And we're seeing these products actually being marketed as versions of the Universal Translator. This is one called Pocket Talk. If you're interested in playing these videos, by the way, I've made my PowerPoint presentation available to the conference. You should be able to go back and play the videos. I don't want to take time here to play those for you, but this is a very interesting one in that it presents itself as a version of that Universal Translator from Star Trek. And in fact, the fellow who is talking here is talking about going to China. He doesn't know a word of Chinese. He's not worried because he'll have the pocket translator that will take care of the language, his language needs. So I'm going to go ahead and rather than play that, I'm gonna go to the next slide here if I can. So just to perform some reality check on these devices, there's a lot of hype and a lot of marketing that's involved. But these are not devices that allow you to carry on a normal human conversation. It's electronic intermediary that you have to hold up into in front of somebody. And the real issue with this is that it's very good at transactional languages. And there's another clip that you can play here about these two tourists that go to Japan and use this device to check into the hotel. And in fact, these devices are designed to be used for transactional languages to get things done in particular domains, like, for example, ordering at a restaurant or checking into a hotel. But obviously, the speaker remains on the outside here using an electronic device like that. It's not really the same as what we expect in human communication. The social factor is simply not there. I mentioned before that the synthetic voices have gotten surprisingly good. There's through AI. There's an add-on to Google Assistant called Google Duplex that allows you to ask Google Assistant to make a restaurant reservation. And if you play that audio, you can hear how good the synthetic voice is. It sounds just like a human. It doesn't sound robotic at all. It has disfluencies in it, ooh and ah, and it's very convincingly human-like. And it has built-in breakdowns devices so that if there's something in the conversation that's unexpected, it can deal with that quite well. Well, from my perspective, as I said before, these devices are not going to fulfill the mission of actually taking over learning a second language. They lack the social and cultural knowledge that we have as human beings. So we know from the social context how to interpret things like sarcasm, humor, tone of voice. These are things that are very difficult for a machine to detect. A machine doesn't have the social experience that we have. Computers don't live in the real world. And that makes all the difference, I think, in what a computer can do with language, what AI can do with language, and what it can't do. The second scenario that we've heard about a lot in research in applied linguistics and computer-assisted language learning in the last 5 to 10 years is that there's been the rise of informal language learning. That is to say that a particular young adults are using resources that are out there online to learn a second language or to maintain a second language or to improve their language skills. And they're doing this basically not so much with the primary purpose of language learning, but really for entertainment or socialization purposes. So I'm talking about folks using social media, using streaming video, streaming audio. Netflix is an example of that. Netflix is available now in 190 different countries. It's wonderful for language learning because it has interesting programming that's motivating for students to watch over and over again. And particularly, it has subtitles typically in both the L1 and in the target language. You can switch those on and off at will. So it's a great tool for language learning. One of the things that's been shown that's very good about watching videos on Netflix is watching things that have repeating characters like soap operas or situation comedies, because you have the same kind of language recycled from one episode to the next. And this aligns with usage-based linguistics, where we're looking at chunks of language, looking at multi-word elements, combinations, chunks of language that are used and repeated with variation. And so working with videos or listening to popular music and at the same time reading the lyrics, and the lyrics for any popular song these days are readily available online. Those are good ways to work with language and for incidental language learning through participating in things that L2 speaker already wants to do. And so, as I say, there's been quite a few studies along those lines in recent research. Excuse me, I went to the wrong link there. Let me keep going here to talk about what the issues are with this view of the future of language learning. Well, for one thing, most of those resources focus on English. Obviously, their social media is available in all languages. But if you talk about professionally produced TV programs or movies, a lot of those are available principally in English. The other issue is that the studies mostly have targeted intermediate or advanced learners, not beginners. And the third thing is that a lot of these services cost money and may not be available anyway for practical issues, cultural issues, religious issues. The digital divide is very much with us. So it's not necessarily, these kinds of resources are not necessarily available to any language learner. It's also the case that there's so much out there that it may not be easy for users to actually find the resources that are of interest to them and at a level of proficiency level that aligns with where they are in terms of their learning trajectory. The other thing that's not present there, if you're doing this kind of language learning independently, and I might mention in addition to the examples that I gave of social media and streaming video and audio, there are, of course, commercial language learning services, Duolingo, Babbel, that offer lots of opportunities for language learning as well. I don't really have time to go into those. They do offer an alternative to formal instruction in the classroom. But I think one of the things that's missing in both of those scenarios, in independent informal language learning and in using commercial language learning services, is that you don't get the guidance and the mentoring that you get in a classroom setting. And so I think that's one of the main reasons that I think we're not going to be out of a job as language teachers anytime soon. But I do think as language teachers, we do need to take advantage of those tools, language technologies, the developing technologies through artificial intelligence that are there, and not ban those from the classroom. And I'm talking about things like Google Translate. I know I have colleagues at my institution who tell their students don't use Google Translate. Well, you're not going to be there in their dorm rooms or in their homes to prevent them from using Google Translate. I think a better approach is for teachers to use mentoring and to actually show the students how to use those advanced language tools and show them what a tool like Google Translate can do well. For example, looking up short phrases or individual words, and what it doesn't do so well, namely idiomatic language or translating a whole paragraph. It also kind of depends on the two languages that you're working with in terms of how good Google Translate is. But I think for most learners in most situations, a hybrid learning environment is optimal. And I'm talking about a situation where you have a classroom instructor who at the same time takes advantage of the resources that are out there in terms of technology. And a teacher is absolutely necessary, I think, for beginning levels, but it's also necessary for fine-tuning at the intermediate and advanced levels. I think you really can profit from that guidance, and including from detailed grammar work at the intermediate and advanced levels as well. That's something obviously that you don't get from Netflix or from social media. I think the other thing I mentioned here at the bottom is that one of the things I think a lot of us have found so useful in instructed language learning is integrating virtual exchange or telecollaboration. It's such a wonderful tool, both for language learning and for cultural learning, that I think to the extent that language teachers can find a partner and do virtual exchanges, I think that's a wonderful thing for students. So I think we'll continue to be needed as language instructors. I think that how much technology will be used will depend on the individual context as well as on the language. I think one of the things that I see as optimal in terms of integrating technology are what are sometimes called bridging activities. And this involves sending students out to find resources online that are of interest to them or at a language level that they can deal with, and then having them report on those, bring those into the classroom, so bring them back into the formal instructional environment, and talk about what they found. There are a couple of benefits to doing that. One is motivation. If you have students try to find resources that are of personal, professional interest to them, that can increase learning motivation. And the second thing is it sets them up potentially for lifelong learning of that second language. If they learn about all the resources that are out there in terms of communities of learning online, in terms of artifacts and multimedia that I've talked about, that can set students up for language, being good language learners after they leave school. And I think my time is about up, and it's which is good because that was my last slide. And thank you very much. I'd be happy to engage in answering questions later on.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Jones, for sharing the idea on your paper. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give applause for Professor Jones. You may put clap, clap, clap in the chat box, or you may also put the emoticon in your screen, yeah? Okay, please hold the questions. We are going to have 3 more keynote speakers. The second one is Dr. Matthew E. Pohner. I believe that you are here already, Dr. Pohner.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm really sorry for the mix-up in the schedule. Really sorry.
No problem. No worries. Thank you.
Okay. Do I pronounce your name correctly? Pohner?
Poner, yes.
Pohner. Okay. All right. Yes. Before we invite Dr. Pohner to deliver the presentation, allow me to read his short bio. Matthew E. Pohner is Professor of World Languages Education and Applied Linguistics at the Pennsylvania State University, a former teacher of French and English as a second language in secondary and university settings. Dr. Pohner research engages Vygotskian sociocultural theory to understand processes of instructed L2 development and to organize educational environments and activities to promote learner language abilities. A major line of his work is devoted to dynamic assessment, a rethinking assessment practice that embeds instruction as part of the procedure to broaden diagnosis of abilities. His recent publication include 2 co-edited volumes, the Routledge Handbook of Sociocultural Theory and Second Language Development, and Toward a Reconceptualization of Second Language Classroom Assessment, Praxis and Researcher Teacher Partnership. And then he is immediate past president of the International Association for Cognitive Education and Psychology and is associate editor of Journal Language and Sociocultural Theory. Dr. Pohner, the screen is yours.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, clear.
Okay, great.
It's clear.
Great. Okay. And can you see my screen? All right.
Yes. Thank you.
Let me go to slideshow. Okay, great. All right. I'd like to just thank you for that kind introduction and to echo, in fact, Professor Jones's remarks that I very much would enjoy the opportunity to be joining you in person, but you know, as Professor Jones was saying about making the most of our the technology that's available to us, this seems like a fantastic way to bring people together conveniently. So I'm excited to be joining you virtually and to have an opportunity to share some of my work and how I see my work situated within broader fields of psychology and education, and how I think it can contribute to the continued development of language education moving forward. So the title of my talk involves sociocultural theory, as you can see, and what I'm referring to as L2 or second language developmental education. And so this is the idea of education that is aimed not only at sharing knowledge about language and helping students develop knowledge about language, but actually helping them develop the abilities to use the language that they're studying. So by way of background, I wanted to share, so you have an image here of the Russian psychologist, L.S. Vygotsky. He is the originator of the cultural historical approach to psychology, which in the field of languages goes by the name sociocultural theory most commonly. And the hallmark of sociocultural theory, what sets it apart from other theories of psychology, is the focus on mediation. So Vygotsky's main argument is in his scientific approach to trying to understand human consciousness, the human mind, and how it develops, he argued that we are fundamentally mediated. So rather than engaging with the world in a direct manner, the way other animals do, where we are just simply responding to stimuli in our environment, Instead, we have something that serves as an intermediary. And that intermediary can be social. It can be other people in our environment. So one of the forms of mediation is social mediation. When we interact with others, you might think of a parent and a young child where the parent is drawing the child's attention to certain things, explaining things, right? That's an intermediate. It's mediating the child's attention and understanding. But we also have cultural forms of mediation. And so these can be ways of representing, so symbolic tools. Vygotsky referred to them as symbolic tools, things like language that allow us to, that filter our perceptions, that filter our ability to think, to remember, to plan. We use language for all of these things. We also filter our reality through things like counting systems. And then in school, we're introduced to concepts that help us to think. So we might have concepts like measurement, right? That would be a concept in math that would be very, very important when we're studying mathematics. So these social and cultural, that's where we get the name of the theory from, these social and cultural forms of mediation are central to us developing our abilities, not just in early childhood, but also Vygotsky was interested in how we develop specific ways of thinking and acting by studying different topics in schooling, such as mathematics, science, and of course, language. So this idea for Vygotsky, trying to understand our abilities, what an adult person can do, he realized it was very, very difficult to study an adult because so much of what we do happens internally. So you can't really observe too much of that. There's not much to see when a person is thinking, when a person is remembering, when a person is solving a problem. There's not much you can see. So what Vygotsky did was he developed a historical method, or he called it a genetic method. This wasn't genetic in the sense of like studying our genes. It wasn't biological. What he meant was studying our abilities as they're developing. And this was why Vygotsky became very interested in children, because he realized that with children, it's not all happening internally. So he could watch very young children completing tasks. He could go and then watch older children. He could watch adolescents and adults. And he could basically observe the process of what he referred to as a growing inward, as our use of resources that are available to us, symbolic tools, right? That cultural mediation, as well as our interaction, that social dialogic mediation, as that was happening external to us and over time became something that was growing inward. And so he referred to it famously as a shift from interpsychological, where much of our functioning is mediated externally, and you can see thinking happening externally, to intrapsychological, where things are happening internally. So on the one hand, Vygotsky was, and this is from De Fermos, who was a scholar working on cultural historical psychology. He said that Vygotsky was fundamentally interested in understanding the present, the abilities that we have now, through the past, by studying how they develop through the past. But he was also very interested in the future. And so understanding how we can glimpse the future in the present. And this is where Vygotsky's most famous proposal or discovery comes into play, the zone of proximal development. So I want to say just a little bit about that. So Vygotsky had this very, very interesting idea that the range of our abilities, if you do an assessment and you think about trying to understand abilities, most of us are used to assessments in which we are given a task and then we have to solve that task independently, and someone observes us doing that. Vygotsky says that's all fine and good, but it only reveals part of our abilities. Importantly, it reveals those abilities that are internal, right? It reveals those abilities that have already developed. So it reveals something about the past. If we're interested in the future, we need to look at that functioning together. We need to look at abilities that are not fully developed. And so this is the zone of proximal development. So this is when an individual is given tasks to complete and the tasks are beyond what the person can do independently. Instead, they require support, they require cooperation. So Verisov has referred to this as the zone of proximal development as a dramatic collision between the individual's abilities and then the demands of the activity that are beyond those abilities. So there is this process of someone external providing mediation in order to look at the person's responsiveness and to see how near they are, how close they are to functioning independently. So a very quick example of this would be imagining that we might have a learner who is carrying out a language task, a communicative task, and we see that they're struggling to use the past tense in the language they're studying. So we might give them a reminder, right? We might say something like, remember, you're trying to talk about the past tense. And that could be all that they need in order to recognize their mistakes and then correct them. Then we would say that the person, that learner, is very close, not quite there, but very close to achieving independent performance. On the other hand, we might need to offer much more extensive support. We might need to provide reminders of how the past tense works. We might need to give an explanation of the past tense. We might need to give a model that they can follow grammatically, how they can form this, and so on. That would tell us something very different about the learner. So what Vygotsky said, and this is why he thought that the zone of proximal development, or ZPD, was so important. He said that the ZPD reveals those abilities that have not yet fully developed, but are in the process of ripening. And for education, why this is important is because that provides the focus for instruction. So think of it this way. If you have a young, let's say you have a child in mathematics, I'll use that as an example, and the child learning mathematics already knows addition and subtraction, okay? You don't need to teach them addition and subtraction. If you did that, you'd be teaching them, helping them to develop abilities that they've already developed. On the other hand, you wouldn't want to teach them something that was way beyond their understanding. So if they understand addition and subtraction, you probably don't want to start introducing algebra. On the other hand, you might start to introduce multiplication. Multiplication might be something that is ripening, that might be in their zone of proximal development. And so making that the focus of their instruction would be a progression that would be developmental. And so the Russian term that Vygotsky used to talk about this idea of focusing teaching that is able to lead development of those ripening abilities, that kind of teaching activity he referred to with the Russian term obuchenie. Okay, so that was just a very brief overview of some of the most important aspects of sociocultural theory, of Vygotsky's ideas. I wanted to very briefly just give a little bit of a background on the role that it has had in the second language field before talking about moving forward in very important lines of work that I think we're going to continue to see more of in the future as people doing sociocultural theory help us to think about language education. So again, Vygotsky himself was working nearly 100 years ago and was concerned with this general theory of consciousness and how our abilities develop. He actually had very little to say about second languages, although he was very interested in first language. Well, Vygotsky's works began to be translated into English some time ago. You have some of those earliest publications, and that's when we started to see, particularly in the 1980s, a general education, a role or influence of Vygotsky in general education, and terms like zone of proximal development became much more commonplace internationally. It was in the 1980s that we actually saw some of the first publications in the field of second languages that were using sociocultural theory. So I'm thinking in particular of the work of Frawley and Lantoff. By the 1990s, this had progressed to where we had edited collections in the Modern Language Journal, as well as edited books showcasing many of the interesting ways in which ideas and concepts from sociocultural theory could help us to understand second language development. But it was only in around 2006 with the publication of a book by Jim Lantoff and Steve Thorne that we saw a shift from using sociocultural theory to understand second language development to instead using sociocultural theory as a basis for organizing educational activity. So asking that question, how can we try to actively promote learner abilities in another language through educational activities that are based on Vygotsky's ideas? And this idea, Jim Lantoff and I, in one of our books, we referred to as the idea of praxis. The idea that Vygotsky understood things like theory and practice as interdependent, right? The idea that we need theory in order to guide our practice. So rather than having language teaching where we just kind of repeat however we were taught, or we just choose things in a random or eclectic manner, we need theoretical principles to guide our educational activities, guide our teaching. But at the same time, Vygotsky argued strongly that our teaching is putting theory to the test. And it shows us where we need to elaborate theory, where we need to change things, where we need to further develop some theoretical ideas. Now, two of the main lines of this research, and these are going to be areas that I'd like to talk about with the rest of our time, are concept-based language instruction and dynamic assessment. So as you can see, both of these got started in the early 2000s. The first, one of the major studies of concept-based language instruction was from Negruela in 2003, and dynamic assessment was work that I began in 2005. I've also included a couple of recent references up there for you if you're interested in seeing kind of an overview of how these areas have developed. Just research timelines that were published only a year ago, and then a very recent handbook of sociocultural theory that I worked on with Jim Lantoff and Meryl Swain. Okay, so L2 developmental education. What I'd like to say about this is, again, two of those main areas, concept-based language instruction being one of them, and the other being dynamic assessment. So I'm going to try to go quickly so I don't use up too much time. But the idea of concept-based language instruction is based on Vygotsky's argument that in schooling, when we study different areas of schooling, science and mathematics, history and language, if we organize the curriculum around concepts, these can actually function as resources or tools for thinking. So imagine a schema, if you will, of the major concepts that define a field such as history, and then using those pedagogically as resources to support learners as they're accessing this knowledge. Okay, that's the idea. So it's an approach to the curriculum. And I've included several approaches, different ways of pursuing concept-based language instruction. One of these, so an overview of this, probably the most well-known, is based in the work of Galperin, who was a student of Vygotsky, and he worked in a number of areas of the curriculum. And so he introduced these 5 phases of for his approach to concept instruction. So the first phase is a presentation or explanation of the concept. So you do this verbally, right? So this is kind of teaching, right? But he does say that these concepts can be complex to understand, and we want to be careful that students are not just memorizing definitions. So this is why the second phase is trying to provide a representation of the concept. It could be a model, it could be an image, but it's basically some kind of representation that is going to facilitate student comprehension of this concept, okay? So to give an example, we might be thinking, an example from science, we might talk about, we might think about gravity as an important concept. So you might give a definition of gravity, but then you might provide a model that demonstrates something about gravity, the essential properties of gravity, okay? And then in this third phase, I'll refer to this third phase as languaging, because this is where learners are prompted to try to think with the concept. So it might be a science student trying to think with the concept of gravity as they work through and explain something about, that where gravity is relevant. So an object falling, something like that. Okay. So communicative thinking there and dialogic thinking, two different ways in which students are thinking aloud and using the concept as a tool to support their thinking. Then phase 4 involves practice. So in the case of language, this is where we might use things like communicative activities, drama-based activities, improvisation, those sorts of activities, any kinds of activities where students are making meaning with the language, but they're using a concept to help them think through the kinds of meanings they want to express. Okay. And then in the final phase, phase 5, is when there's full internalization, meaning that the model is no longer needed and that students have internalized the meaning of that model. They carry that tool for thinking with them. They have a psychological tool that they can use to make choices about their language use. Okay. So, I don't have, how am I doing on time? Do I have a few minutes left?
Yes, you have 2 minutes left.
2 minutes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I won't say too much about examples of that in language, but I will just, point to the idea that, you can think about verbal aspect as a concept, right, to help us think about how we want to talk about events in the past. And so there have been some interesting studies done looking at this, where you might have, as an example, images that are trying to show us different ways that we can think about the same event, and whether we want to say things like John painted the fence or John was painting the fence. These are different ways of talking about the past, and it has to do with verbal aspect. It's not a rule for students to memorize, but rather it's a way for them to think about language resources. So to finish up, the second main area of work that I wanted to mention, and this is where my own research has been centered, is the topic of dynamic assessment. And so dynamic assessment follows that idea of the zone of proximal development, which says assessment should be involved with and focused on identifying not what learners can do on their own, but how responsive learners are when we work with them, when we provide prompts and support. How do they respond? Because that can tell us about their abilities that are forming. That can tell us about where they're headed. And so that's where we can focus our instruction. All right. And so here's one of the leaders outside of the field of second languages, Reuven Feuerstein, who used the idea of dynamic assessment with learners with special needs, learners who often would struggle to perform tasks, complete tasks on their own, but when offered support, they could respond in sometimes very surprising and impressive ways. And here's just an overview of some of the many, many publications and projects that have been carried out in our field of second languages with primary school learners, with learners at universities studying languages, learners studying English as a foreign language, and learners studying less commonly taught languages, indigenous languages. And then, as with Professor Jones's presentation, there's also been work that has been involving technology-enhanced learning environments, quite a lot of that recently. And so
I'm sorry, Dr. Pointer, your time is up, so maybe you can wrap it up.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So you have here an example of a dynamic assessment, and I'll finish just by pointing out that you can see, this would be a way of thinking about assessment where you might ask learners to complete a task on their own, see where they struggle, then begin the process of offering prompts, questions, feedback, and look at their responsiveness. And then you can see differences in how they perform. And this can tell you something about how we might want to target instruction and what sorts of underlying difficulties learners might have. So I'm happy to talk if there's time later and if there's interest about some ongoing projects and interests that I have. And otherwise, I will thank you for the opportunity to share some of this, and I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Poner, for a very interesting presentation. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, again, you may give applause for Dr. Poner. You may write clap, clap, clap in the chat box or show the reaction on the screen. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's invite the third speaker, or the third keynote speaker. Yeah. The third keynote speaker is Dr. Yuichi Ono from University of Tsukuba, Japan. I believe that he's here already with us. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Several years ago.
Right. Okay. So, hello. My name is Lulu. I'm going to chair the session. Dr. Ono. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before we invite Dr. Ono to share his presentation, let me read his short bio. Yuichi Ono, who received his doctoral degree in Japan in 2015, is a professor of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Tsukuba in Japan. He was employed as a co-manager of the Center for Education of Global Communication in 2011. After he had been working at Oyama National College of Technology in Japan for 15 years, his research area includes technology-enhanced language learning support system, universal learning environment design, and collaborative learning, as well as theoretical and computational linguistics such as contact linguistics, second language acquisition, and natural language processing as an English and natural language processing. As an English as a foreign language instructor, he teaches computer-assisted courses such as intercultural communication, critical reading skills, and integrated skill enhancement courses to Japanese EFL learners. In addition, he is in charge of research-related courses such as second language acquisition, contact linguistic, and language processing. Dr. Ono will talk about potentials and challenges in analyzing learning behaviors in a post-COVID-19 online education program. Dr. Ono, you will have 20 minutes and the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. Yeah, for your detailed introduction about myself. Yeah, hello everyone. It's a great honor of me that I can present in front of so many people on the screen, to more than 231, very biggest audience that I have did so far. So I'm very surprised. So thank you very much for coming. Okay, today my presentation focuses on the learning behaviors and how to make the situation better by using these empirical and actual authentic data, learning behavioral data. So my talk focuses on the specific research of myself. Instead of too much focusing on the a rationale or very important concepts about that. Instead, I'd like to present my own research, and I'd like to present what I'm thinking about as an important factor influencing the learning behavior from the psychological point of view. Okay, let me start. Okay, all right. And this is my talk outline. Okay, let me start with the backgrounds. As most of you experienced, COVID-19, ironically, in a sense, advanced the online learning environment in Japan as well. So, for example, lots of students started to buy a lot of computers or mobile devices, for example, and online distant learning environment forces students to try to communicate with students by use of online. So kind of the learning environment has become much better in a sense due to the COVID-19. It is ironical. It is very ironical, but it is a fact. However, from my point of view, so by use of technology, we are able to collect lots of behavioral data on the basis of the online. However, there are lots of discrepancy between learning behavioral data and their actual learning in general. So let me focus on that at the end of the presentation. I would like to propose an idea, very general psychological idea, but most of them do not deal with or employ this idea completely. So maybe this is a suggestion to all of you as all the instructors. So please give me a feedback about your own experiences. Okay. Sorry. Okay. All right. So as you might know, technology and foreign language instruction has a very strong relationship and united with each other. And in the history of language learning and technology, so maybe start with LL, language laboratory system, and computer-aided instruction, computer-assisted language learning, and more recently, it is called mobile-assisted language learning. And teaching paradigm is also changed gradually. Firstly, at the LLH, most of the instructors focus on the drill practice. And, CA and code days, maybe this communicative approach was enhanced. And the recent paradigm maybe focused on the authentic approach to the communication. So actually, this is summarized in Mark Washower's research. So now, recently, 21st century integrated core age. So technology, multimedia, and internet. And the English teaching program is kind of content-based. Recently, it is famous as the CRIL, content content language integrated instruction, called CRIL. And view of language is what the former presenter talked about, social cognitive, social interaction based. And authentic discourse is a principal use of computers, and more focus on the accuracy, fluency, and agency. This is very important point of view. And in the old days, maybe you might know that this is tape recorder, which is very mainstream in Japan, maybe 30 or 40 years ago. And now Walkman appeared from Japan. Maybe you might know Sony. It is a very big company. And Sony produced a Walkman, cassette tape, and the recorder is portable, completely portable. And this is the dubbing device, machine, So one school, one machine day. So English teachers are try to dubbing what the students should listen to. And CD player appeared. So what is important is that change of speed mode. So maybe they can use freely, depending on the proficiency level of students. And this is LL room. This is very old and conventional. And this is from the teacher's side. So teachers has to, operate this system. And recently, computer appeared in like this way. And so with the advancement of technology, more and more data has become more accessible. And actually, recent research should try to collect as many data as possible from the authentic learning behavior. And this is also called learning analytics. This is the name of the research field. So this is the purpose is that understanding and optimizing learning and the environment in which it takes place. So kind of the evidence-based or data-based approach is a recent trend in the field of educational technology. And let me introduce two case of studies. The first case study is about learning behavior in speaking task. Several years ago, one of my students, actually his name is here, Fusuro, 2017. It's a little bit old, but this is very primitive research of myself. To take use of the text-to-speech technology in speaking practice, and try to collect the data how the student studied, along with depending on the difficulty of sentences or difficulty of passages in general, and integrate the data from the proficiency level of the students as well. And our focus is on relationship between material difficulty and learning behavior. Second one is learning strategy and learning behavior. These are the points of the study in this study. Yeah, and system design is very, very simple. A text input is given, then processing works out, and speech engine produced the speech sound that students listen to, and data log data is go to the database, and speech output is also given. So we try to analyze data from the database and make a prediction about their proficiency level and so on. So this is the interface of the system. So this is a passage-based English passage given here like this way. So students choose full text version, sentence version, or chunk version, word version, and then text box appears, and if sentence version pattern is put here, then students listen sentence by sentence. If they understand well about the sentence, they can listen to the sentence many times, repeatedly. The same is true about the chunk word. 3 or 4 word chunk is provided in this passage. Then, if the students don't understand what the chunk means, then the student repeatedly listen to the chunk repeatedly. So, kind of the repeatedness of the student and proficiency level might have some relationship to understand the students' learning. That's our hypothesis. And the data is also visualized like this way. This is a strong point of learning analytics. So this is the word. Okay, that this student chose word mode. So from the first one till the end, they placed word, and listen that way. And I don't know why, but about this time, suddenly the student changed the mode of the sentence, but again started listen to the word this way. And for this, figure shows that students repeated the same word again and again. So this behavior is signals the instructor that what words students are interested in and listen to. So this visualization is very nice. And the important thing is here is that at the last point, this student listened to a full text, maybe because he wants to summarize, or as a total, they listen to the passage in general. So this is a learning style. So this visualization shows that the student's learning style as well. So the different person shows that way. This is kind of the bottom-up learning behavior. So this student start with chunk mode, and go back to the word mode. And then, their students' lengths get longer, so sentence mode. And lastly, full text, like that way. So this is what we call bottom-up learning behavior. So then, our research question is that, sentence, are there any patterns in the learning behaviors? Basically, we divided the learning patterns into 3 types: sentence-centered group, and chunk word focus group, and balance group. So what's interesting is that, when we give the, difficult material, like here, asterisk signals that, sentence is very difficult, and the upper people and lower people, so that we compare this way. So lower people try to use the balance mode. The same is true this way. The same is that way. The same is that way. So lower people tend to focus on the small part. And the next question, is there any relationship between learners' proficiency level and learning behaviors? So basically, number 6, this is a difficult version, difficult one. But upper people try to go sentential, and very few people went to the chunk mode or word mode. But number 7, this is easy one. And I'm so sorry. It's different. This is the easy one. Sentence number 6 is easy one, and the sentence number 7 is a difficult one. Even the upper student try to go chunk mode. So this is the point. Our research. However, going back to the original data, that is a very important warnings from the data. So we have to be careful about that. The data shows, for example, that a participant seems to listen to a target parts repeatedly. they listen to the same word repeatedly again and again and again. But the follow-up interviews sometimes show that they are aware that they repeated them, but they do not remember them well, or they simply forgot them in the speaking test afterwards. So these learning behavior does not go to their proficiency themselves. So there is a discrepancy between learning behavioral data and actual data of proficiency level. So we need to be careful with that. So second case study is about learning behavior in listening task. So as most of you know that listening task is very difficult than reading task due to lots of reasons. Since time is limited, let's skip. But maybe most of you agree about that point. More cognitive load in listening task compared to the reading task. In that, they can take sufficient time in reading, but no time to think about in listening some English data, English sentences as well. And so our research focused on the one type of very difficult task, that is a dictation task for this research. Dictation is a process of writing down what someone else has said. So listen and produce what the student actually listened to. So the very difficult task. What difficulty is that dictation involves activation of the processing of grammatical, contextual, phonological knowledges. So all the processing levels comes up to the dictation task. So dictation task might be considered as predicting a proficiency level to a certain level. This is our hypothesis. So Japanese company whose name is Chiel, produced this kind of platforms of that might be a bit convenient for running analytics data. So our study employed this system. So like this way, this is the interface, and so the system has 6 parameters or buttons that the students can operate. One is seek the place to start to play at, that we call seek button. Number 2, push and start the stop button, start and skip button. Number 3, back by 2 seconds, back mode. Number 4, forward by 2 seconds. 5, set A and B point for repetition, for repeating purpose. And change the speed, went to the end and stopped, complete. So how they operate, students operate these parameters, and that might be visualized very nicely. So the research question is that what is the relationship between learning behavior and listening strategy in the online dictation practice courseware? This is our research questions. Actually, this is what we did during the COVID-19 age. Okay, so and as a psychological point of view, listening strategy inventory, ELSI, was employed for the study. So now I would like to skip this part, but we conducted a large-scale study about that, and we divided 4 factors on the basis of the factor analysis that our data. So factor 1, global understanding strategy. Factor 2, paralinguistic and grouping strategy. Factor 3, knowledge and experience-based strategy. Number 4, general learning strategy. So these 4 factorial points of view, we analyzed our data. So this is the result. The correlation analysis was conducted. So our correlation analysis showed that for task 1, medium length, difficult level, so general learning strategies have a very slight correlation with the backward. So students go back. This is the very slight, not very strong. And this is a negative correlation. So better proficient learners do not use the back button so frequently. This is a general tendency. And the number task 2 is a medium one, very easy one. So that adds to task 2. In addition to back button, start and stop button is also rarely used as the proficiency developed. And the same result has been given. And task 3 is a very short one, very short one. And the result is that change in speed mode. So if the sentence is very short, the students seem to be interested in what is the word it is sound. So very change speed and listen carefully. So this is appearance of change speed mode shows that the students are very careful in listening to a particular word. And number 4, task 4, very difficult one, a long one. There is no significant correlation was observed. So the point is that, I'm sorry, the one more analysis at the decision tree analysis was also conducted. So dependent variables is a proficiency level, like this way. So top 2 nodes is about learning strategy. So learning strategy, correlate with the learning behavior, and these two together predict their proficiency to a certain level. This is our result. So, however, in this analysis as well, they listen to the same word repeatedly, but they don't understand the listening part. It is very possible.
Excuse me, Dr. Anna, you have
yes.
2 minutes left.
Yeah, okay, 1 minute. I will complete it. Thank you very much for your reminder. Okay, so one very important point that I raised in my presentation is that the concept of information avoidance. They listen to the word and they repeatedly aware of the word. However, they don't understand. They forgot everything. What is the reason about that? So information avoidance is a kind of the data of our interest. So this is also this is the summary of the last study. So they do not enjoy the act of thinking. If they are unsettled by something that new information might create, they do not care about the information. So then information avoidance might occur. So even if they are proficient learners of English, and even in your native language, you listen to a very sad news, for example. So they don't listen to the content of the word, anything like that. If the participants of the cancer in the hospital, even the doctor politely tell the situation about the patient, the patient didn't listen to the doctor as well. So the same situation often occurs about the information avoidance concept. So this might be a big psychological construct that we assume. So, but everything left for future research agenda. So maybe if you have any question about that or comments or advice for me, I welcome any kind of information about that. Okay, that's all for information. And okay, almost 20 minutes is left. Thank you very much for your patience. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ono. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give applause for a very informative presentation, from Dr. Ono. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to the next keynote speaker. I believe that Professor Ni Nyoman Padmadewi is already. Yes, thank you very much, Professor Padmadewi. Yes, Professor Ni Nyoman Padmadewi is from Universitas Pendidikan Ganesha, Indonesia. Allow me to read her short bio. Ni Nyoman Padmadewi is a professor in English language education at Universitas Pendidikan Ganesha or Undiksha, Bali, Indonesia. Her master's degree in education was obtained from the School of Education at Macquarie University, New South Wales, Australia. A doctorate degree in linguistics was completed at Udayana University, Denpasar, Bali. She is the coordinator of the doctorate degree in English language education at Undiksha. Her research interests lie in literacy, inclusive classroom, English for young learners, English teaching methods, and assessment. Professor Padmadewi is also the founder of a bilingual kindergarten and bilingual primary school in North Bali, Indonesia, as well as a consultant for curriculum design and teaching English for students with special needs and a reviewer for international journals. She will share her paper entitled Current Issues of Teaching English to Students of Special Needs in Inclusive Classroom. Professor Padmadewi, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Ibu, for the opportunity given to me to share the ideas about teaching English for students with special need in inclusive school. I'm Ni Nyoman Padmadewi from Undiksha, Bali. I will start my presentation by providing you with a graph about the number of students with special need included in primary schools in Indonesia. As you can see on your screen, there have been many types of students with special needs which have been included in a primary school in Indonesia. Even though there has been a lot of students with special needs have been included, but the fact that, based on my observation, there are many schools in Indonesia, especially those in small cities, still need sufficient support system and also need to have enough and sufficient expertise and skill how the student with special need can be handled in an inclusive school, especially in teaching English. I will give my time and more examples by providing best practices of how the process of teaching and learning have been conducted in a school, and this is more about giving practical ideas on technique of teaching, with the hope that the audiences will have a kind of inspiration how they are able to teach students with special needs in their classroom. Okay, I will skip some of the slides here in order so I can give so before I give you a kind of practical ideas, let me remind again, or maybe review again, the definitions of inclusive education. As you might all know, inclusive education means that all students, all children are included in the same classroom, in the same school by the same teachers. What is meant by these ones? Students with learning difficulties or maybe having a kind of impairment are also included in the same regular schools. You can imagine that the process of teaching is not really that easy, but it will need a lot of challenges, need special skill, because you have to be able to give your attention not only to the student of regular, regular student, but also you have to be able to give special attention and also treatment, how you are able to deal with students with special needs in your classroom. So that is the challenge of how this one can be implemented in a school. I will, because of the time limitation, I skip some of the, slide. So let me tell you that there are many types of inclusive education, but what are mostly implemented in the school are up to type. The first one is partial inclusion. The second one is full inclusion. So what is meant by partial inclusion? Students with special needs are included in a regular education classroom, but are also pulled out for required services. For example, to be provided with speech or occupational therapy to more segregated setting. While in full inclusion, the students with special needs are included in a regular education classroom, and spot aids are given to the regular education teacher to assist the special education student in the classroom. So what are the types of students with special needs that can be included in a regular school? There are some types like hearing impairment, visual impairment, Down syndrome, autism, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, intellectual impairment, learning difficulties, slow learners, or other type of special needs students. So which kind of student that can be included? This is a kind of, one case in North Bali, Indonesia, which already implement a kind of certain technique which I consider as best practices, because I see how the school have been able to implement the process of teaching and learning in a very effective way. So in order to decide which student can be included in the inclusive school, that very much depends on the readiness of the school. The type of special needs children accepted in inclusive classroom can be mildly visual and hearing impaired student with sufficient aid, or student with speech or language problem, or might be mildly mentally disabled students. So it depends really a lot on the readiness of the school. There are many characteristics that you might already know about some student or autistic child. I don't want to read it all of this because I believe that you know all about this one, but they are very unique and special, and for that reason need special attention from the teacher. Asperger's student now is included into a student with autism. Before it is specially categorized as Asperger's student, but now it is categorized as a part or category of autism. Right, so there are many types of students with special need. The point that I want to emphasize in this presentation is that how the school can start to have inclusive education in their in the school. The first one, you may start with how the philosophy must be included in the vision and mission of the school. So then every part of the school members realize the importance of including those students in the school. And after that, you have to create system and program for them, socialization and teacher training. Like I told you, teachers need special training on this one because it's not that easy. You have to be able to divide your attention in a one regular classroom, but you also have students with special needs in your classroom. So you have to be able to provide special training for your student. And what is also important is that how the school are able to give orientation to the parents of special needs especially, and they need to be involved in certain program activities so that the way you teach your student will be also consistent with how the parents at home can treat their students. You need to have, if it is needed, a shadow teacher. It can be a kind of the teacher who are able to help you in the classroom. And also you have to be able how you design special individual education program, which is really designed based on the student need. So you cannot just use your program or teaching learning material just like to all students in regular classroom, but you have to be able to design special program based on the student need that are included in your classroom. And don't forget, you need to be able to make cooperation with experts and the therapists as a kind of consultant for you. If, for example, you have a kind of problems in handling your student, and after that, you start with implementation. Parents' involvement is so important. Why? Because student at school is only several hours, but the rest of the time will be at home with the parents. So it's so important that the parents will be able to provide consistent kind of treatment, so then the student will not be confused about what must be done, because the treatment will be in line with what is given by the therapist, what is given or practice at home, and what is given at school. So that's why parents' orientation and involvement need to be conducted. What can be done at school? The first one is that you need to observe and paying attention to the student behavior. The teacher, for example, need to know what are the characteristics of the students, because you have to be able to provide treatment or the process of teaching and learning based on what they need. If you just include your student in your classroom and without giving special attention to them, it might be not that effective to have students in your classroom. For that reason, it's so important to have this start. The second one is that recording the student performances and behavior, discussing the data with the teacher, school principal, have coordinations with parents, and if it is too severe or you cannot handle it yourself, you can recommending to parents in order to take the kids to go to specialists. So as a way of recording the data, you can have a kind of simple table like this one in order to monitor and take a note on the student growth, and might be also to identify early impairment if it is what exists. So you can have this kind of table to help you how you are able to take a note on the student's growth and impairment. Right, this is one example how inclusive school apply the process of teaching and learning to the student with special need. So the school that I observe conducting integrated and pull-out system In integrated system, the students with special needs are included in a regular classroom in certain subjects, like arts, PE, music, games, or project. While in pull-out system, the students are pulled out and treated using individual education plan based on their levels and based on their needs. Students are taken and taught in a special room. So what are the philosophy of teaching students with special needs applied in a bilingual school? The first one is that differentiated instruction. The second one is the whole person approach. The last one, project-based learning, constructivism. This is in line with the previous presentation, Vygotsky ideas, Piaget or John Dewey, who are in line with the last one. So differentiated instruction actually, the learning approach which is tailored by taking into account individual differences and the need of students in the same class. While the whole person approach is that approach to deal with all aspects of the person, which take full account of the emotional, physical, or spiritual dimension of the person, while project-based learning is that how the teacher provides the student with direct experiences from which the students are expected to be able to construct the new knowledge. So these three main basic philosophy of how the process of teaching must be conducted. In differentiated instruction, you have to be able how you are giving attention to the student with special need by differentiating the instruction and the learning material in order the students of special need can follow what you have to teach. The whole person approach, you have to be balanced in all aspects of the student, not only giving attention on the cognitive domain, but also other domain, especially emotional and spiritual dimension of the person. So this is one example how the student are put in a what is it, integration. The student at the back is actually the student with autism. So he is able to follow the body in front of them, how the movement must be conducted. So here, the student is able to understand the instruction, the language, which is in English by the teacher, by imitating the student in front of him. So the next picture shows that here, the student is able to give a kind of, what is it, to do the instruction, because the teacher always provide them with example. So here is another one, how the instruction are provided visually and stick on the table. This idea in order the student have a kind of understanding what is instruction means. Sometimes if you rely on verbal instruction, the student might not be able to understand, because being special need like autism, for example, is not easy to have verbal communication, and they tend to be visual learner. Because of that, you are able to stick on the table about what is the expectation, what is requested from the student. So by having this kind of instruction, the student not only learning about the words in English, but at the same time, they are learning how things must be done. The next one is that cooperative learning. Here, the student need to study from peer. This is the practice of not only how the content or the thing can be done, but also how values of character education is also practiced. The student here, the peer, will be able to develop a kind of acceptance, understanding, tolerance. So then this is really goes along with their understanding how things must be done. The next one is that how morning circle can be practiced. This is the practice of language use and communication skill. These all students are students with special need, autistic, ADHD, and also student of speech delay. So what is conducted by the teacher here is that they have a kind of routine to do a kind of morning circle, and then they have to greet each other, so the student can learn or imitate other students and how they're able to practice the greeting every morning. And after that, the teacher provides the student with this kind of media, because students tend to be visual learner. So by looking at the picture provided here, they can choose how they feel on certain day. What is the day today, whether today is sunny, today is hot, for example. So these are kind of one idea how the teacher can provide the students so the students are able to practice the language that they have. The next one is that peer tutoring. This is a part of buddy program that is conducted in the school. So the student here with the blue t-shirt is an older student. So here, like I told you, not only the student are able to do what is expected to be done, or the task can be accomplished, but also how the character education, the values of leadership, the value of tolerance, the value of acceptance is also developed well. The next one is that what is also important is that how multisensory teaching can be provided, because the student can learn by using many kinds of sensory teaching method. So the student can practice more using the media that you use, either visual media, auditory, and also kinesthetic. So the one that is also very useful, like I told you before, is the implementation of constructivism through project-based learning. What is special about the project-based learning is that students are the ones who are designing the project. If we are in a regular classroom, very often we find out that the teachers are the one who design the project. But here, you can ask the student, might be older student, to design a project for them. So then the students are able to design a project by themselves. What are the significance of this one? The first one, practicing character value. Because involving student at higher grade to lead the special needs student, giving the chance of the student of higher grade to exercise leadership, empathy, collaboration, creativity, and acceptance of being different, practicing the learning ownership, practicing the authentic use of English, developing more understanding, respect, inspiration regarding being teachers and their responsibility. So how this was conducted in the school? The first one is that the teacher started to have a kind of orientation about browsing ideas, how the student of older grade can help the student of special need. And after that, after they agree with the kind of ideas, they are grouping students and they divide the tasks into the group. And after that, project execution, implementation, and the last one, reflection and feedback.
Excuse me, Professor Padma, you still have 2 minutes left.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, this is one example of how the student design legacy project for special needs student. So what is special about this one? This is considered as a legacy project because this one can be used for several weeks, where the student actually design this kind of project. So then the student can take the student of special need to do the game, and at the same time, they are able to practice the use of the language. So this is how they are leading the student of special need, how start, for example, jump, etc. So this is so important. I will like it so much. Why? Because the student not only able to understand the English vocabulary, but they are also practicing the character values. Okay, I skip. This is the feedback provided by the grade 6 student, how they are feeling so special, they are so helpful, and also they are so sweet by giving a kind of impression how the game with special need can be practiced. This is all the comment provided by the student of older student when they are practicing the project-based learning that they themselves design. So this is the type of rooms that need to be done. So you have to be able with, providing them with visual media, which is how the student learn by seeing what is stated, what is stick on the wall, for example. This is so important. This is right. So what is important here is that in your process of teaching, don't forget you don't only teach your student about English, but you can insert other therapy based on the student need. It can be behavioral therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, visual therapy, or sensory integrated therapy. So then you are also leading the student to be independent, not only learning English. So I think this is the example of media that the team have been created in order to help the student. This is the media to to be able student to discriminate media for matching, for example. This is, and I just want to skip about this one, how the media is really used, how the use of English can be used in a authentic context. This is one example how instruction must be taken by the teacher all over. So then every time the teacher see, for example, the student misbehave, if, for example, verbal instruction is not understood, the teacher can just show the card. So then the student are able to follow what the teacher has requested them to do. Well, because of time limitation, I think that's all that I can say. So this is one thing, sorry, 1 minute. Okay. This is the example of our assessment is conducted in order to check the student progress. So they use this kind of code, minus, plus, this kind of symbol in order to see how the student, in what aspect of language instruction the student has been good and which one need to be improved. So this is conducted every week. So the teacher have a kind of a very serious data collection about the student progress. So what I can say about this one to conclude is that every child is a different kind of flower that all together make this world a beautiful garden. Just need your commitment, how you are able to implement the best you can. Teaching is a science, at the same time, it is an art. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very inspiring, Professor Padma. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give applause to all the presenters, 4 keynote speakers that we are having today. I think they have already shared lots of information and also inspiring and informative and also amazing ideas. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have the question and answer session for about 25 minutes. I would like to ask the ICT team to show the questions for all the keynote speakers. Yes. Question number 1 is for Professor Robert Godwin Jones from Mugit Srifai, Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia. I learned from the plenary session yesterday that some apps provide feedback produced by AI. How effective do you think this type of feedback to help autonomous language learners? Yes, Professor Jones.
Well, it's a little bit difficult to make a general statement about that because every app is different in terms of what it's capable of providing in terms of feedback. But there are apps that will allow the user to put in parameters that are specific to that user and will allow the feedback to be tailored to for example, to the proficiency level of the user. Now that's most often seen not in generally available mobile apps, which I assume that the question is about, but that's more typically found in systems that are labeled tutorial call or iCall, intelligent call, where you have the opportunity to have a profile of the learner created, and so that the system knows about the learner in terms of proficiency level and prior experience with the language, may even have the capability of recording common errors, and so knows about problematic areas in terms of learning that the learner has a history of. But as I say, that kind of personalization is wonderful. It's not usually available in mobile apps, and the question may be targeted to commercial language learning apps like Duolingo or Babbel. And I don't think generally that level of personalization is available in those.
Okay. Thank you for answering the questions, Mugit Srifai. I hope that answers the question, yeah? Okay, if you have further questions, I think you may contact Professor Jones after the session. Okay, question number 2 is for Dr. Matthews E. Posner. It's from Hot Maria State Vocational School 8 Malang. The question is, during pandemic, I did small survey on group of 100 students at my school about how confident they are to communicate in English. What I expected from doing online learning is the students were more confident to speak in English rather than in offline session. In fact, most of them were still choosing written form to communicate. So the question is, what kind of scaffolding is suitable to make them speak in L2 during online classroom, or in English? What kind of scaffolding is suitable to make them use English in speaking during online classroom? Yes, Dr. Ono?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the question. I think first I would just say I would use the term mediation rather than scaffolding. Scaffolding is something that's associated with sociocultural theory, but it's not, it's not actually something that Vygotsky talked about. It's sort of an interpretation. And I think one of the differences is that mediation is about development. So one question that I think I would come to is, what is the aim of the activity? Is the activity intended only to get students to speak, or is there, are there other assumptions there? And if it's, if it's about trying to get students to perform with an eye toward having them perform correctly, right, versus an opportunity for them to, in fact, make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes. So, without looking at the context of a specific activity, I would think that the kind of mediation that you might offer would be, it's hard to say, in the abstract, but I think it would, first of all, it would need to take account of the learner background. It would need to take account of the ultimate aim of the activity. So developmentally, what are we trying to get them to practice? What are we trying to get them to do, and why? And then, kind of what sorts of resources, would be available. So I think, as Professor Jones was talking about, even the value of using things like online dictionaries and Google Translate and so on, that these can be tools, and we can develop an awareness of what these tools offer us, and also how these tools can become resources for us to engage in language in a meaningful way.
Right. So thank you very much for the answer. Now let's move on to question number 3 for Dr. Yuichi Ono from Penil Rasati SM IT Junior High School, Ar-Rahman, Bantul. Okay, congrats, Mr. Ono. Your presentation was attractive. My question is, what are the stimuli to make the students care about the information and enjoy to think? Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much for your question. Maybe stimuli sounds a little bit curious to me, because any kinds of good or affirmative or negative stimuli is possible. So maybe what kind of stimuli is important? Yeah, of course, we need, for example, we have 40 students in a classroom and conducted this kind of research. Maybe we try to pick up a very unique information to their personal characteristics. For example, most of the students stops here, but some of the students don't stop there. Then maybe we have to think that why small part of students do not stop. So maybe this kind of question sometimes makes us realize very important things that I didn't consider so far. And moreover, longitudinal study sometimes showed that more personalized, or say more belief-based strategy. So they never change their way or anything like that. So sometimes, if we find, of course, this kind of things is that if you are instructor, maybe you are aware in facing to such children or students. So maybe from such experience or interaction impression might help us a lot to analyze more data on a personalized level. So maybe a stimuli is also important, but observation-based analysis is also important. This is my answer. I hope that my answer is satisfactory. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ono. Yeah, if there are if the participants are still curious, I think they can contact all the keynote participants individually through emails. Yeah, I believe they will be I think you are going to be very welcome with the participants' question. Okay, the next question. Yeah, the next question is for again Professor Jones. It's from Yangon University of Foreign Language. Okay, I'll try to pronounce the name. Yeah. Okay. How do we integrate students who are familiar with AI language and those who can't use smart devices? Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, an important one, I think. One of the aspects of integrating technology into the classroom is that very often there will be some students who are already very familiar with certain technology, certain mobile apps, for example, or have explored language learning apps on their personal devices. And there will be other students probably who haven't had that experience. I think there are a couple things that you can do. One is to invite those students who have found something of interest. This is these so-called bridging activities that I was talking about in my presentation. Students who have used AI devices or certain mobile apps that they found to be useful and motivating, that one of the things that one might do is ask them to present that briefly in class. Might be a warm-up activity in a class for one of the students to just show the app or the AI tool that that student has found to be useful. Share that. Now, it's also useful if the teacher can be informed a little bit about what's available in terms of tools for language learning, so that this teacher can make an informed decision about what apps are appropriate to have demonstrated in the class and what maybe might be avoided. One of the things that's always tricky with apps is that many of them have a freemium startup possibility. They don't cost anything to download and get started, but then after a while you have to pay for them. So, that's one of the things that you have to look at as an instructor. I mean, there are lots of free apps out there also, but I would take advantage of those students who in your class, if you have some of them who are savvy in terms of using technology, and have them demonstrate and kind of mentor the other students.
Okay. Thank you very much for the answer, Professor Jones. Yeah, I hope that again for the participants who ask questions, I hope that answers the question. We still have more questions to come. Okay, again, we still have time up until 9:45. Okay, the next question is for Professor Ninyoman Padmadewi from Anonymous. So this person do not really want to be known, yeah. Okay, thank you very much for your insightful and inspirative presentation. Based on your experience or research, how did the teacher discipline their special students, especially the ones with autism or ADHD, to concentrate and engage in the learning process?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. Based on the research that I did, and actually just by chance as well, the school that I mentioned that come into my observation, actually the school that I founded. So I developed the program for them. So what was conducted by the teacher is that the first one, it's so important to understand what is needed by the student. And one interesting thing that we need to understand as well is the students sometimes do not like if the teacher say no. So if, for example, you ask the student to do something, you can say, yes, but you have to do this. So that's the first one. So because the student sometimes, if you are saying no, they already do not really like it. And then the student might be developed into a kind of tantrum. So you have to understand first, and then after that, you can start by giving a kind of instruction, but instruction, you can do this later after this must be done. So you can use either picture in order to help the student understand about it. And after that, you can show what will be rewarded after that. If, for example, the student are able to do something. So the first one and the next one as well. Sometimes we need a kind of coordinations with parents. Student uniquely or sometimes weirdly showing a kind of behavior which is really very difficult to be understood. So you might need to have a kind of coordination with parents. What is happening the night before? Because sometimes the students have a kind of weird behavior because the night before, for example, their lack of sleep or because of a certain reason. Let me give you one example. One day, student with special need, then suddenly just a kind of showing tantrum on certain day and didn't want to go to school because we just started to have a kind of Saturday classes. So what happened when we tried to make communication with the parents? Saturday is the time for them to go to the therapist, which the student didn't like. So because of this, and every Saturday, the student just have a kind of tantrum behavior, sometimes difficult to be handled. So in this case, the teacher need to understand what must be done, how that to be done. Sometimes being restless because the student cannot stay more than 15 minutes. So if, for example, the students is given a kind of task or activities more than the time needed, he will be restless, he will be not able to stay still. So you have to understand about it. So what you can do, take the student, take them out, for example, 5 minutes to just go around and after that coming back. So the point is that it's so important to understand the student characteristic and understand their needs. So because of that, you have to be able to create what is the solution for that one. And during the, the pandemic before, the technology that is used by the school is SEAMEO application. So in order to do that, sometimes we can see as well that the student is not really easy to be on screen. So what is given by the school is that to give orientation to parent first. So the parents need to understand how to use technology, and after that, by using parent as the tutor, it is expected that teachers and parents can make a kind of cooperation and how they are able to keep engaged and keep participating, even though for 15 minutes during online. So I hope I can answer the question. I hope it's answering the question, Ani.
Okay, thank you very much for Professor Padma. Yeah, I believe that for the time being, yeah, the answer would be considered. I think it would be enough. And then we still have more questions actually to go. Question number 6 for Dr. Bona from Sunya Puspasari Suganda in Universitas Indonesia. You mentioned that DA is based on ZPD, which among others focuses on how well the students respond to the instruction given and how they manage to cope with the task. My question is, what should we do if students are reluctant to show response? Many teachers dealing with Indonesian students are familiar with this problem. Yeah. Indonesian students are known to be shy when asked to speak or to engage publicly or socially. Yeah, what does this phenomenon show us and what can we learn from that? Okay. Yes, Dr. Bonner. Yes, please.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think that it's not something that is unique to Indonesian students. And you know, one of the things that it may show us is a students' concern over producing errors, lack of confidence in their language abilities, and so you know, with dynamic assessment. One of the things that we have found is that it's often viewed positively by learners because it offers a way of thinking about and engaging in assessment that feels safe, that feels less threatening, because the expectation is not that they're going to be able to perform successfully on their own, not that they have all of the answers, but rather that they are jointly constructing responses with the assessor, that there is this cooperation between the assessor and the learner. And again, if you recall, much of the early work of dynamic assessment was done in the field of special education. So this is certainly a population of learner that you know, often has a history of academic struggle, academic difficulty, and so we see that. And with language learners, it's not completely dissimilar. Right, so we see that sometimes students are resistant, that there is that concern, and so I think it's helping them to move toward a new way of thinking about assessment that is not putting them in the hot seat, not putting them in a position of stress and pressure, but rather as an opportunity to work with the teacher, with the assessor, to try to extend their abilities, to try to stretch their abilities beyond what they can do on their own. So I think it's a more collective and more cooperative way of thinking about assessment than what we are sometimes used to. And it takes time. It takes time to gain that comfort.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Ponet. Let's see whether we still have more questions. We have 4 minutes to go. Yes, question number 7 from okay, this one is from Ernie Yulianti, State Senior High School, Pangkal Pinang. From Ernie to Dr. Ono. How effective is the dictation process in writing activity? Yes, Dr. Ono.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Again, very interesting, you know, approach. Actually, I did this style of things, you know, listen and write correctly, and this, you know, has a nice, you know, benefit for learners because in addition to listening carefully, but also they have to, you know, produce it in a careful way. So they need to monitor their you know, awareness about grammar or vocabulary, phonology, and in total integrated way. However, in my impression, what you need to be careful is that you know, sometimes you know, you know, dictation is very, very difficult for most of the students. So it is very difficult to comprehend everything in accurate way. So on the basis of that, only the, you know, evaluation on the writing performance sometimes resulted in insufficient coverage in an integrated total learning process. So maybe it is okay as a task that, you know, they challenge, students will challenge that listening very carefully and approach carefully. However, on the side of the, you know, instructors or teachers, we need to be careful on what side of the focus is emphasized in front of the students. So, so listening based dictation approach or writing based writing approach or integrated way. So, but you know, I think it's a, you know, it's a very nice approach that we need to be pursue in the near future. Yeah, is that answer? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ono. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the answer from Dr. Ono actually concludes the session for plenary the second. Okay, again, allow me to join me to give them a very big round of applause, yeah, for the keynote speakers. I think I would like to give an applause for all of you because you have already shared very informative and actually enhancing information, yeah, some of the ideas are actually new, something about AI, and then also the social cultural theory, and how to deal with different special needs students, and also dealing with discrepancy of data and actual data. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think I will hand in the session or the next session to the Master of Ceremony, Ibu Anissa Nuria. Thank you so much for Professor Jones, Dr. Poner, Professor Padma, and also Dr. Ono. Thank you. Good morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now heading to the parallel session 1. The committee has prepared 4 parallel rooms. Please click breakout room button and choose the room that you wish to enter. To have a clear idea on how to join the parallel session, please pay attention to the video. We will start the session in a few minutes. Should you have any problems in joining breakout room, the committee will assist you. Thank you for your attention and cooperation.